KIMT continues to follow a shocking story tonight out of Worth County. Law enforcement and out-of-state agencies were called to 1,000 block of Highway 9 in Manly this morning to rescue just under 200 dogs. KIMT News 3's Brian Tabick was there when it all happened.
Truck after truck, you could hear the faint sound of barking through the bitter cold winds. The Worth County Sheriff's Office is teaming up with the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, or ASPCA, to rescue over 170 Samoyeds, ranging in age from elderly to just a few weeks old.
This is an overwhelming situation.
Tim Rickey is one of around 30 members of the ASPCA called in to help with the operation and to set up safe places for the dogs to go.
There's a lack of sanitation and just generally not adequate care for these animals.
According to online records, the house is listed as White Fire Kennel, owned by Barb Kavaris. Sheriff Fank with the Worth County Sheriff's Office says they've known about the conditions for several months and have even tried to help.
It's been going on almost a year that we've been back and forth dealing, because at first you would give up a few animals to the Humane Society, and we thought it kept working, we could get her dwindled down, but we just lost ground.
Fank says White Fire Kennel was once USDA licensed, but that has since been revoked. Now the ASPCA is asking for people to educate themselves before buying a pet.
Anybody looking for an animal, be responsible in where you're purchasing those animals so you're not supporting substandard puppy mills.
Crews were on scene for around 10 hours. In Manly, Brian Tabick, KIMT News 3.
We did reach out to the owner of the property, who did not want to give us a comment at this time. Those with the ASPCA tell KIMT they'll be taking the dogs to an undisclosed location for the safety of the animals. We expect to learn more later this week. The latest developments in the investigation surrounding what law enforcement are calling a puppy mill in North Iowa. Yesterday, around 200 Samoyeds were taken from White Fire Kennel in Manly. The environment was described as appalling and overcrowded. Now we know the dogs have been taken to an undisclosed location. But we're learning this is a problem in more than just Worth County. You can see on this map just how many of these facilities are in the state of Iowa. And now KIMT News 3's Brian Tabick is learning about the rules and regulations throughout the state that allowed the operation in Manly to continue until this point.
Those with the Worth County Sheriff's Office say the owner of White Fire Kennel, Barb Kavaris, was once licensed through the USDA and the Iowa Department of Agriculture to breed these dogs. I spoke to the Iowa Department of Ag this afternoon, who tell me they inspected White Fire Kennel a number of times this summer before deeming the facility inadequate this July, forcing the Worth County Sheriff's Office and the American Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals to get involved. But according to the Department of Ag, that doesn't mean she has to stop breeding, because her state license is still valid until she's convicted of a crime. As for a background of her USDA license, it gets a little more tricky. You can see a list of investigations they've conducted, but they only date from late 2015 to 2017. And when I called them this afternoon to try and get more information, they told me I had to fill out a Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA, which means it could take a long time for us to get the information we're looking for. But state representatives say this isn't a new issue. I reached out to 5 Iowa lawmakers today and got a variety of responses regarding the laws around breeding facilities.
There's no real teeth in any of it.
Representative Sharon Stackman says the House has been working to pass legislation for several years to make changes to the Iowa breeder laws.
Raise the penalties for abuse of animals from simple misdemeanor to a misdemeanor, and then if there's serious injury or death that causes death to the animals, then it would be a Class D felony.
She says the House leaders pushed the bill to the Ag Committee, where it later died. We reached out to a few other elected officials who actually represent this area. Senator Waylon Brown says he's not knowledgeable on the Iowa breeder law, and State Representative Jane Bloomingdale is out of town. Both declined to do interviews. But there is headway on a bill in the Iowa Senate as well.
Iowa code has maybe not been quite as clear as perhaps it could be on how those things can be prosecuted.
State Senator Tom Shipley of Adams County says they started working on this bill after a local boarding and training facility was found to have poor living conditions.
Another senator and I worked with a county attorney to put some language together that would make it potentially easier for county attorneys to prosecute people who commit cruelty to animals.
meaning there could be 2 bills in the next legislative session, something Steckman says she's looking forward to seeing.
I would hope that this would wake people up.
In Manly, Brian Tabick, KIMT News 3.
Those with the Worth County Sheriff's Office say they will not be facing charges against Kavars until after they collect all of the evidence and assess the dogs. Each of the schools in the Rochester Public 170 dogs seized from a North Iowa kennel last week. Law enforcement calls the facility a puppy mill, and they joined with the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, or ASPCA, to rescue the Samoyeds from Whitefire Kennel in Manly. Now, KIMT News 3's Brian Tabick is finding out how long the process of getting these dogs to safety has taken.
16 young Samoyeds rescued last week are almost ready for adoption.
We have a huge number of people that have been interested in adopting these dogs from us.
But Sybil Sukup of the Humane Society of North Iowa says the process of getting these dogs the care they need started almost a year ago.
The owner's veterinarian, the breeder's veterinarian, reached out to us for help and told us that breeding was out of control on the farm and there was a significant number of dogs that weren't being properly cared for, and asked if we could intervene.
She says her facility didn't have law enforcement power to enter the property, so they had to take a different route.
We were able to connect with the owner of Whitefire Kennels, built up a rapport with her, and she started releasing dogs to us about 9 months ago.
But she says that's when they learned how bad of a situation these dogs were in and started asking for help from state and national rescue organizations.
Several were interested, but said no because of Iowa's lacking animal welfare laws. We are 49th in the nation, and they worried about how that would affect a major rescue effort.
She says the ASPCA stepped in, eager to help and fund the operation to save these dogs from what they say was a neglected home environment. But there's still a lot of work left ahead.
A little puppy like this will recover and adapt to a normal lifestyle fairly easily, but it's the adult dogs that have a lot of emotional, behavioral issues that they're going to need some work until they can be ready to be available for adoption.
The dogs aren't ready for adoption just yet. Sukup says they do still need a little bit of vet work done, but they will post pictures on their website when they're ready. In Mason City, Brian Tabick, KIMT News 3.
Sukup says they took in over 130 dogs before the rescue efforts last week. And the Humane Society of North Iowa is just one of 4 shelters taking in the Samoyeds. Others include the Cedar Bend Humane Society in Waterloo, the Nebraska Humane Society in Omaha, and the Wichita Animal Action League in Kansas. Well, traveling to tonight, Barb Kavars is hoping to be reunited with 9 of her dogs and 4 cats after nearly 200 animals were seized from her property. She's accused of keeping nearly 160 Samoyeds in overcrowded conditions and below freezing temperatures. Officials took these dogs from the breeder in mid-November, and now a number of them are at Midwest shelters and foster homes. KIMT News 3's Brian Tabick sat in on Kavars' first court appearance. He joins us now live from the newsroom with today's testimony. Brian?
Katie, Deputy Andy Grunoff says he was one of the first to make contact with Barb Kavars, owner of Whitefire Kennel, after being notified by the Humane Society of North Iowa. He says when he checked up on the breeder, he didn't know what the severity he was walking into.
She talked about still wanting those dogs back, those 9, and then maybe even a couple more, at least 2 females that she could breed and continue to have puppies.
Deputy Andy Grunoff was the first to take the stand, as well as the first to speak with Barb Kavars after being contacted by the Humane Society of North Iowa back in March.
She was concerned that some of the dogs had been fighting, and she was unable to get those separated.
Deputy Grunoff says he made around 10 trips back to the Kavars home and the conditions never changed. He says there was a lack of water and feces and urine covering the floors of the kennels. But it wasn't until November 12th that Deputy Grunoff saw the conditions in the home.
It was awful. Even walking to the door, the smell of ammonia was incredibly strong. And then once you went inside, it'd almost take your breath away.
The county also called an ASPCA forensic veterinarian to the stand to explain the health effects these conditions can cause to the dogs and even humans, and that even the 13 animals Kavars wants to keep are not in good condition.
Fracture of the upper left incisor, which is the front chiclet tooth. Both ears have moderate amount of brown waxy debris.
And that's only 2 of the dogs of the 154. Perlman says she has large concerns over the health of over 70 of them. But Grunoff explains Kavars has only been contacted about the issues this year.
Her husband had died in June of 2017, and at that point, I figured prior ones, he would have been there to help, and she had made comments throughout the visits that he did a lot of the heavy lifting.
I just got off the phone with the judge about a half hour ago. He says the county did finish up their testimony today, and the defense, including Kavars, will take the stand tomorrow. Live in the newsroom, Brian Tabick, KIMT News 3.
We begin with continuing coverage of a case that's garnered national attention. Barb Kavars is in Worth County Court trying to get some of her cats and dogs back after the ASPCA and deputies seized nearly 150 dogs from her property in Manly. Yesterday, a deputy and veterinarian took the stand, testifying about the conditions the dogs were living in, with no access to clean water and describing kennels covered in feces. KIMT News 3's Brian Tabick was back in court today as Kavars explained how she felt about the dog's health conditions. He joins us now from the newsroom with the details. Brian?
Katie, we're learning a lot about the history of Whitefire Kennel today, as well as how Kavars describes the living conditions of these dogs and their health.
Matter of Worth County, Iowa versus Barbara J. Kavars.
While our cameras were allowed in the courtroom, the court granted the defense to not allow us to shoot video of Kavars' testimony. She explained today she started breeding part-time in 1998.
We had our first puppies back in October of '99.
Kavars explained she was USDA licensed until an inspector told her she didn't need a license because of the way she sold.
I sold direct to the new owners.
Kavars went on to say she started breeding full-time in 2010 after being laid off work, and in 2014, her husband became ill.
He was helping and everything was going fine until January of 2014. He was diagnosed with a cancerous brain tumor.
She says she looked for help in downsizing as her husband did a lot of the heavy labor around the operation, but
The places I called said they would not take, like shelters or rescues, said they would not take dogs from breeders.
since 2014, she says she knew she needed help, and in 2018, she contacted the Humane Society of North Iowa to help start taking dogs.
I took dogs the next week, which was like I believe it was the last week of January.
The Humane Society of North Iowa contacted the Worth County Sheriff's Office in March. They testified yesterday that the dogs were without water and that Kavars told the deputy she doesn't water them every day in the winter.
We walked around the dog kennels, and he asked me how often do I water the dogs, and I said at least once a day. And I did mention that the dogs do like to eat snow, but I never said that was the only thing I gave them.
Despite a forensic veterinarian with the ASPCA inspecting all of the dogs, including the 9 she wants returned, and finding them to be in poor health, Kavars disagrees.
They were fed once a day. They were just given sufficient amount at that time for the number of dogs in there.
One of those dogs she's requesting to be returned is pregnant.
Does the pregnancy change your opinion as to whether the dog should be returned to you?
No.
Kavars says she would be capable of caring for the new puppies as well as the 9 dogs and 4 cats.
Do you have any current plans to breed any of the other dogs once they're returned?
No, I do not plan to.
The judge is also making a decision that the 9 dogs and 4 cats be moved to an affiliate facility of the ASPCA. That facility will be located in Iowa, and this is so that the employees can return home. Kavars will also be allowed to see these animals before they are moved. Live in the Mason City newsroom, Brian Tabick, KIMT News 3.